Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be posting here, but I just had the strangest, most eye-opening experience of my career, and I needed to share it. I'm the CEO of a mid-sized logistics company. We handle shipping and supply chain management for a variety of businesses. I started this company from the ground up, and I've always prided myself on treating employees well. But recently, I started hearing rumors. It started with a few complaints that seemed out of character: delays, unhappy customers, and even a couple of anonymous reports about poor working conditions. I asked my managers what was going on, and they all gave me the same corporate speak answer: everything is under control. But it didn't feel under control. So, I did something drastic. I decided to go undercover. I told my assistant I'd be working remotely for the week, got myself a fake name, shaved my usual beard, and borrowed an old beat-up car to fit the part. My cover story? A temp worker looking for some extra cash. I signed up through a staffing agency and was assigned to one of our busiest warehouses as a forklift operator. The first shock hit me before I even walked in the door. The parking lot was filled with cars that looked rough. I'm talking dented bumpers, missing hubcaps, and plenty of temporary repairs. These weren't the cars of people who felt well paid and secure in their jobs. I started to feel uneasy. Inside, the warehouse was a completely different world from my corporate office. The air smelled of oil and cardboard, and the lighting was dimmer than I expected. The whole place had a weird energy, efficient, but tense. No one smiled. No one laughed. Just the constant sound of machines, barcode scanners beeping, and boots scuffing across concrete. A supervisor named Bill gave me a 5-minute rundown of how to operate the forklift, which, by the way, is not enough training, then sent me to work. No welcome, no introduction, just, try not to break anything. I got the impression that Bill had been there a long time. He looked exhausted, but also angry. Like he was just waiting for something to push him over the edge. As I worked, I started chatting with some of the other employees, asking casual questions. That's when I started hearing things I really wasn't prepared for. Apparently, we're short-staffed, very short-staffed. The company had been pushing for efficiency, which translated to fewer people doing more work. Forklift operators were being pressured to skip safety checks to keep up with quotas. One guy, Jason, told me he tweaked his back last week but didn't report it because he couldn't afford to miss a shift. Another worker, Maria, mentioned she hadn't taken a full lunch break in months because they were always behind schedule. I was floored. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. And then, just when I thought I had a grip on the situation, something happened that made my stomach drop. I was maneuvering a pallet when I heard a loud crash from the next aisle. Bill's voice rang out, furious. "I told you to be careful. Do you know how much that's going to cost?" I turned the corner and saw a younger guy, maybe in his early 20s, standing next to a shattered stack of inventory. His face was pale. He looked terrified. "Please, it was an accident," the guy stammered. "Bill wasn't having it. That's coming out of your paycheck." I felt my hands tighten around the steering wheel. That's illegal. I was about to step in when someone behind me muttered, "That's just Bill. He always does this." I have never felt more like a stranger in my own company. And that's when I realized, I'm not leaving until I fix this. So where was I? Oh yeah. Bill was trying to dock a worker's paycheck for an accident. Now let me be clear, I've always believed in accountability, but fair accountability. Accidents happen. That's why we have insurance and safety protocols. The idea that someone would lose part of their already modest paycheck for a mistake made my blood boil. But I couldn't blow my cover. Not yet. So, I stayed quiet and watched. The worker, his name was Danny, looked like he was about to argue, but then his shoulders slumped. He just nodded. He knew there was no point in fighting it. Bill turned and stalked off, muttering under his breath. I decided to check on Danny myself. "Hey man. You okay?" I asked. He let out a shaky breath and rubbed his hands on his jeans. "Yeah. It's fine. Not the first time." Not the first time? That set off alarms in my head. What do you mean? I pressed. Danny glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Bill does this all the time. If something breaks, he blames the workers and tells payroll to deduct it from their checks. He knows most of us can't afford to fight it." That was it. I was done just observing. But I needed more. So, I spent the next few days doing what I never thought I'd have to do, investigating my own company. And what I found shocked me. Overtime abuse. Workers were volunteering to stay late because they knew if they didn't, they'd be seen as replaceable. But they weren't getting paid for it. Lack of safety enforcement. Forklift maintenance was being skipped to save time. I checked a few of the logs. One of the machines hadn't been serviced in 6 months. Fear-based management. No one wanted to report issues because they were scared of losing their jobs. Complaints never made it past Bill. He either ignored them or worse, retaliated against workers who spoke up. I felt sick. I built this company to create jobs. To provide opportunity. And yet, here I was, standing in a warehouse where people were afraid to take a lunch break. Then came the breaking point. It was late, near the end of my shift. A storm had rolled in, and the loading dock was slick with rainwater. We were rushing to finish an order before closing when I heard a sharp yelp. I turned just in time to see Maria, the worker who never took lunch, slip and fall hard. Her arm hit the concrete with a sickening crack. Everyone froze. Bill stormed over, his face red. What the hell was that? Maria, get up. She tried to, but the moment she put weight on her arm, she gasped in pain. It was bad. And then, Bill said the worst thing I had heard all week. If you can't work, you can clock out now. But don't expect sick pay. We're already behind. Silence. I looked around. Every worker there was staring, but no one said anything. I realized why. This was normal for them. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles ached. I had 2 choices: keep playing the undercover role or put an end to this right now. I made my choice. I took a step forward, squared my shoulders, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "She's not going anywhere. And neither are you, Bill." He turned, confused. "Excuse me." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and flipped it open. My company ID, my real one, stared back at him. A few gasps. Someone whispered, "No way." Bill blinked, looking at the ID, then at me, then back again. His face went from red to white in seconds. Wait, he stammered. "You're—" I nodded. "Jacob Carter, CEO of this company." Silence. And then, I said the words I had been waiting all week to say. "Bill, you're fired." The warehouse went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights, the distant rumble of thunder outside. Bill just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked around, expecting someone to back him up, but no one did. Not a single worker said a word in his defense. That's when I saw it click for him. He was done. "Why, you can't just fire me like that," he stammered, taking a step back. "You don't know how things work around here." I took another step forward, my voice low but firm. "I know exactly how things work around here, Bill. That's the problem." Maria, still cradling her arm, was staring at me like she wasn't sure if this was real. I turned to her. "You're not working another second until you get checked out by a doctor. I'm covering your medical bills." Her eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me." I turned to the rest of the crew. "And no one here is ever working under these conditions again. This ends today." Bill let out a nervous laugh. "Come on, you can't actually believe everything they've been telling you. They're just workers. They'll say anything to get rid of me." A voice from the back of the group spoke up. "No. He's right." It was Jason, the guy who had told me about skipping safety checks. His arms were crossed, his jaw clenched. "You've been screwing us over for years, Bill. About time someone saw it." That was all it took. The floodgates opened. One by one, workers started speaking up. Complaints poured out: missing overtime pay, equipment failures, harassment, the constant fear of losing their jobs. Maria, wincing in pain but still standing, finally found her voice. "Last week, I had to choose between buying groceries and paying for my son's asthma medication because my check was short. You said payroll made a mistake. But that mistake always seemed to happen when people worked too much overtime." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. My stomach twisted. How had I let this happen under my own roof? I thought I had built something better than this. I thought I had people in place to take care of my workers. But the truth was, I had been sitting in an office, reading reports, and trusting the wrong people. Bill's face turned bright red. You can't prove any of this. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. I recorded everything. So unless you want to take this to court, I suggest you pack your things. He sputtered, looking around one last time for someone, anyone, to take his side. No one did. He muttered something under his breath and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the metal shelves rattled. I let out a slow breath, then turned back to the crew. I need you all to listen. I know I don't deserve your trust right now, but I'm asking for a chance to earn it back. I had no idea this was happening. That's not an excuse, it's a failure on my part. But I'm here now, and things are going to change. Nobody spoke, but they were listening. That was enough. I pulled out my phone again, this time to make a call. Janet, I said when my assistant picked up. Get payroll on the line. I want a full audit of every paycheck for the past year. Any missing wages get repaid immediately. I locked eyes with Maria. And find me a workers' comp lawyer. We've got medical bills to cover. Maria's lip trembled, and she quickly wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I wasn't done. I looked back at Jason. You've been here a while, right? 5 years, he nodded. Good, I said. You're the new shift manager. His eyes widened. Wait, what? You know how this place runs. You know what's broken. And I know you actually give a damn about the people working here. That's the kind of leadership we need. Jason looked around at the others, then back at me. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Maria said, giving him a weak smile. He swallowed hard and nodded. Yes. I nodded back. Good. Because we have a lot of work to do. As the storm outside raged on, something shifted inside that warehouse. Hope. Change. A new beginning. And I knew one thing for certain. I was never going to let myself get this disconnected from my own company ever again. The fallout was immediate. By the time I got back to my office the next morning, my inbox was flooded. Messages from managers, HR, regional directors, all of them panicked, confused, or in some cases, furious. Word had spread fast. A CEO doesn't just fire a warehouse supervisor on the spot without making waves. The head of HR, Claire, called first. Jacob, what the hell happened? I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the city skyline. I went undercover. I saw what was really happening in that warehouse. Claire exhaled sharply. And you fired Bill? Yes. Silence. Then, a carefully measured response. That's going to be a problem. I knew what she meant. Firing a supervisor without the usual corporate red tape wasn't exactly protocol. But I also knew what I had seen. The fear in my workers' eyes. The way Maria clutched her broken arm, afraid to ask for medical help. The paycheck deductions, the safety violations, the exhaustion. We're going to have lawsuits, Claire continued. And if this kind of mismanagement is happening in one warehouse, what if it's happening in others? That's exactly what I'm afraid of, I admitted. I could almost hear her flipping through notes. So what's the plan? The plan, I said, standing up, is to fix this. All of it. The next few weeks were chaos. I personally visited 3 more warehouses, without warning. Each time, I found more problems. Maybe not as bad as Bill's location, but bad enough. Overworked staff. Equipment issues. A culture of silence. Some of my managers, people I had trusted, were more concerned with keeping numbers up than keeping people safe. I fired 2 more supervisors. Then, I did something that sent shockwaves through the entire company. I gathered all the regional managers for an emergency meeting. No PowerPoints. No scripted reports. Just me, standing in front of them with a simple message. We're done running this company like a machine. We're going back to putting people first. If you don't like that, there's the door. A few left. I expected that. Some people thrive in toxic systems. But most of them, after the initial shock, stayed. And for the first time in a long time, they listened. I rolled out a series of changes, effective immediately. Mandatory safety training and audits. No more skipping forklift maintenance. No more rushed safety checks. Anonymous reporting system. If workers had complaints, they could submit them directly to HR, bypassing their immediate supervisors. Wage and overtime investigations. Any missing pay? Reimbursed. No questions asked. Workers' comp reform. No more discouraging injury reports. No more making people choose between their health and their job. Some managers pushed back. We can't afford this, one of them argued. These changes are going to cost us. I looked him dead in the eye. You know what costs more? Lawsuits. High turnover. A workforce that hates working for us. He shut up after that. And then I made one last decision, the biggest one yet. I stepped down as CEO. Not permanently. But for the next 6 months, I appointed a temporary CEO to handle corporate operations while I focused on fixing our frontline operations. I put on a different title, Chief Workforce Officer. For 6 months, I was in the field. Not in a suit. Not in boardrooms. But in the warehouses. On the floors. Listening, learning, and making sure every single worker knew. This company belongs to all of us. And I will never let it fail you again. Stepping down as CEO, even temporarily, was the boldest move I had ever made. And honestly, it terrified me. But I knew it was the only way to regain control, not just of my company, but of its soul. Because somewhere along the way, we had lost it. The first few weeks as Chief Workforce Officer were intense. I was no longer making high-level executive decisions. Instead, I was in the trenches, talking to workers, supervisors, and managers who were still adjusting to the idea that I wasn't just doing some corporate PR stunt. Some welcomed the change. Others? Not so much. One warehouse manager, Paul, made it clear he thought this was a joke. No offense, Jacob, but you're not one of us, he said on my first day shadowing his facility. You run the company from a penthouse office. You don't get what it's like down here. I didn't argue. He had a point. So I let my actions speak for me. I spent my days working alongside the team, unloading shipments, packing orders, and doing the same backbreaking labor they did every single day. I listened to their frustrations, about management, about pay, about safety issues, and I made sure those frustrations were acted on. Then, something unexpected happened. The workers started stepping up. Jason, the guy I promoted to shift manager after firing Bill, started hosting informal safety meetings before every shift, something that had never been done before. If they won't train us right, we'll train ourselves, he said one morning, standing in the break room with a whiteboard, drawing out proper forklift maneuvering techniques. Maria, who was still recovering from her injury but refused to quit, came to me with an idea, a mentorship program for new hires. Half the reason people quit is because no one teaches them how to survive here, she said. Let the experienced workers train them, and they'll stay longer. It was brilliant. I greenlit it on the spot. But not everyone was thrilled. 2 regional directors quit outright. They didn't like the changes. They didn't like that I was shifting power away from middle management and toward the people actually doing the work. This isn't how a company runs, one of them scoffed before resigning. Good riddance. The hardest part, though, was dealing with the long-time employees who had given up. The ones who had been mistreated for so long that they didn't believe change was possible. Linda, a veteran worker at one of our oldest facilities, pulled me aside one day. I've been here 15 years, she said flatly. I've seen CEOs come and go. They all make promises. None of them last. What makes you different? I thought about that for a long time. Then I told her the truth. I don't want to be different. I just want to be better. She didn't say anything at first. Just studied me with tired eyes. Then slowly, she nodded. We'll see. And then came the first real test. A surprise OSHA inspection. Before I went undercover, an inspection would have sent everyone into a panic. But this time, we were ready. Safety protocols had been reinforced. Equipment was being properly maintained. Workers actually knew their rights. When the inspector walked through, clipboard in hand, he found a workforce that was actually being heard. At the end of the visit, he shook my hand. Whatever you're doing, he said, keep doing it. That night, I sat in my car outside the warehouse, staring at the dashboard, just breathing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right track. But then, just when I thought things were stabilizing, I got a call that changed everything. A competitor, one of the biggest logistics companies in the country, had caught wind of what we were doing. And they did not like it. They were planning something big. Something that could take us down for good. And I had no idea if we were ready to fight back. The call came late at night. One of my contacts in the industry, an old friend, warned me that a major competitor was planning an aggressive expansion. Not just anywhere, but right in our strongest markets. New warehouses, massive hiring campaigns, and worst of all, poaching our best employees with higher wages. It was a direct attack. For the first time since going undercover, I felt something I hadn't in a while: fear. We had just started fixing things. We weren't ready for a war. If we lost key people now, everything we'd built would fall apart. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my leadership team, including my newly promoted managers from the warehouses. I laid it all out. We can't compete with their money, I admitted. But we can compete with something better: how we treat our people. Instead of scrambling, we doubled down. We improved benefits. Not just pay, but real benefits: childcare support, flexible shifts, better health coverage. We fast-tracked the mentorship program Maria had suggested. We made sure every worker knew they had a future here, not just a paycheck. And when our competitors started reaching out to poach our employees, something incredible happened. Most of them stayed. Not because we paid the most, but because they saw what we were building. They believed in it. 2 months later, we did something I never expected. We actually grew. More people wanted to work for us. Our reputation spread. Even some of our former employees who had left for our competitor, they came back. That's when I knew we had won. 6 months ago, I went undercover to fix a broken system. I thought I'd find small issues, things that could be solved with better policies. Instead, I found a company that had lost its way. But today, everything is different. Warehouse injuries are down. Retention is up. Employees, real employees, not just middle managers, have a say in how things are run. And the best part? We didn't just survive the competition's attack. We came out stronger. Last week, I officially stepped back into my role as CEO. But I'm not the same leader I was before. I don't just read reports anymore, I listen. I visit warehouses. I talk to workers. I make sure they know, this company isn't just mine. It's ours. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about logistics or leadership. It was about trust. If you take care of your people, they take care of the business. And I'll never forget that again.